of fame are never enough. But then you came along and put me back together, and every desire now satisfied here in your love. There's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. We know it's true. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and faults. Lord, you see them all. You still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountains is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only King. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only King. You turn praise into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into harvest. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing, nothing is better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn crazy to gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into harvest. You're the only one who can.
Hello, Samford, and welcome to this convocation program as part of the For the Good series, sponsored by the Francis Marlin Mann Center for Ethics and Leadership. And it is a special honor for me today to welcome the chairman of the Samford Board of Trustees, Mr. Bill Stevens. In fact, this is a personal privilege to me because this is the last of these convocation programs that I'll be involved in as president of Samford. And so I specifically asked that Mr. Stevens be my last guest. And so, Mr. Stevens, if it's all right with you, let's just make this Bill and Andy.
Yes.
It's going to be a lot easier
Yes.
for that part of the conversation. And after all the years that we've had together, I think it's all right for us to call each other Bill and Andy.
I agree.
Welcome for this.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, I want to get quickly to the questions because inquiring minds want to know all the details that we're going to ask about this. And Bill, I think that you already know that what we seek to do through this convocation series is to feature people who have done it right in the terms of their business careers and their family relationships and all of those things. People who have been consistent in their faith and example and practice. And we think that our students can learn from getting to know people like you. And I know you don't hold yourself in that category, but we do. And so thanks for taking the time for this interview. First, help us to get to know you a little bit better. And if you will, take us back to the beginning with the early influences in your family and what it was like growing up. And well, you tell us about where you grew up in the big town where you grew up and all of those things so that we know you a little bit better.
Thank you, Andy. I was born and raised in Alexander City, Alabama, and grew up there and stayed there obviously until I went off to college. But I was fortunate enough to be born into a wonderful Christian home. I had great Christian parents that modeled for us a wonderful example of being Christians, of being parents, and just being loving individuals. I have one older sister, and we still get along well, marvelously today. She was a great role model herself, a far better student than I ever was, but it was a great place to grow up. When I was there, it was a relatively small town of 10 to 12,000 people, and most of them worked in the cotton mills, textile mills, and it was. They set great examples for Charlotte and myself as we learned because of the way they took on their appropriate responsibilities working. But our home was a loving place. Family meals were always there, plus a pound cake that my mother used to keep all the time that I still love. But you know, it was really, as I look back now, I can't think of a way that they could have done anything better. They supported us in whatever we were doing. They nurtured us. They saw that we were at church together. We were always there as a family. And it was really an important part of our lives. When the church was open, we were usually there, Sundays and Wednesdays, and Mother was a dedicated choir member. Daddy was Sunday school superintendent for many, many years. My sister played the piano. I just attended. So. But Alex City was a great sized town to be raised in from my perspective.
Well, talk with us a little bit about that. You know, the idea of the company town is not very much a part of what people experience today. Right. But Alex City in those days was very much that, right?
It was. The Russell family, they owned the company. I was in my formative years. The company ended up going public, but it was mostly privately held for most of those years before they went public. And we lived on the Russell Mill Village, and it was houses that were provided by the company. Later, as in later years, I asked my dad, I said, what was the rent? And he said it was $25 a month plus $5 for each bedroom.
Oh my!
And the largest bedroom house we knew of was 2. So, but they had carpenters, painters, electricians, plumbers that took care of all the properties. And of course, you grew up with that group of people. The people all worked at the mill in some capacity. I also attended Russell School. Russell had a school for kindergarten through 8th grade for all the mill employees' children. I should go back. I was born in Russell Hospital, for which they had. And the family looked after every one of those things. They had sort of, I learned later on in years, they had sort of divided up in certain individuals in the family. One would take the school, one would take the hospital, and they would see that things were done right. And I learned early on that, there's a way to care for people. I didn't learn this or understand it till I was an adult, but I certainly learned it as a child, that they provided things for us to do that were nurturing, that were educational, that were good for the community. And certainly, it was a good place to work for most of the people that were born and raised in that area. They never really thought about moving away. They would do that. And, and the family was extremely good to not only to that area, but to other areas and other parts of the state as well, to support different programs in the schools and hospitals. But we all went together in one high school when my time, and I graduated from high school in 1966. And so we got to meet up with the people that had gone to what was called the city school that was there. And there was also an Avondale school, because there was a smaller Avondale mill in Ellick City at the time. And we all came together, and certainly, that was really the first time that we were able to get to know those people and be friends with those people. But, Russell School holds still a fond memory for me. I think back of Mrs. Julia Russell was the person that was in charge of the school. And to think back about it, and we were, textile mill employees' children, and we had kindergarten. We had music as a regular curriculum through the 8th grade, so we were taught to appreciate that and understand it and limitedly perform that. But there was we had a school, we had a gymnasium, we had basketball teams, we had baseball teams, and one of the things Russell Mills made in those years was athletic uniforms. They later called it Russell Southern, then Russell Athletic, but we were never lacking for uniforms because we had the mill took care of that and really took care of all the teams. But I really wouldn't want to change anything about my growing up place, as well as my growing up family. Yeah.
You were learning as a child and as a young man some really important lessons just by watching that approach to corporate life, I think. And, I can see that in you even today about, as I hear you talk about Samford employees and the concern that you have for people who work here. And my guess is that got wired into you pretty early with watching how the Russell family had felt an obligation to the people that were working for them.
It really did. As I said, I didn't realize a lot of that until I was grown. But when I think back about how they cared for the people and the things they had for the people, and it extended beyond the individual that worked at the mill, it also was for that family and the things that they offered and provide. And I'm sure endless things that were taken care of that no one knows about.
Sure.
But after I was grown, I got to thinking, that was not all bad. It's different, times have changed, but there's still the right ways to do that. When you think about when employees work for you, it's their family. You need to be conscious of what the things you can do, what benefits you can provide that would help the family. What, how can you keep their compensation competitive so that they can have a reasonable lifestyle, no matter what their job might be. But all of those things that came with it. But the other thing that I thought was really important then, and I thought in my working career, is being visible in your company. You know, being out there, that people see you and know you, and vice versa.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted so badly to make sure I knew everyone's name, and it's hard, you know, as numbers grow and you don't see people a lot. But I think back on it, and you say, you know, it's nice to know, and for them to know that someone is mindful of what they're doing for whatever it is their task might be.
It's true, and that you're interested in
Yes.
them and in their families.
Yeah, and how things are going for them, and then, you know, if bad things do happen, natural disasters, fires, things of that nature, that you step in and take care of the needs so that they don't have to worry about certain things.
Right.
I can remember in my working career that we had a couple situations where we felt we needed to take care of the funeral expenses of an individual, and it was an untimely passing in a family, and they just didn't have the funds for it. And, you know, we wanted no recognition for that, but it was the right thing to do,
Right.
Andy. It really was.
I understand. And I want us to get into some discussion of your corporate career in just a minute. Before we go there, tell us how'd you land at Samford?
Well, I mean, God's hand's been on me my whole life, and I can never come close to what's been done for me. But I actually started my college career at a junior college in Montgomery. And it was a really easy decision because I needed a scholarship to go to school, and it was the only school that offered me a scholarship. So it was a pretty easy decision. But in the summer between my senior year and high school and starting college, I met the basketball coach at Samford at a Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp. He was there, and I got to meet him, and I didn't really, it was not anything memorable at that time, but due to some circumstances at Samford, some injuries and some other things, they had a couple of places opened up, and he contacted my high school coach at Thanksgiving and wanted to know if I might be interested. And so he called me, and I certainly was, because my sister was already a student here. She was a year ahead. And, I certainly knew of Samford and thought that would be great. Certainly a 4-year school versus a junior college, and that sort. So I came up during the Thanksgiving holidays and tried out, and it worked out. And he offered me a basketball scholarship to start with the second semester of my freshman year. So I transferred at Christmas, and came. Would have been the Christmas of 1966.
Yeah. And if I ask you to stand right now, and the camera panned, people would understand why you got a basketball scholarship at Samford. But you had a great career in basketball here, and I know, you're about to say, well, it was all right. You had a great career at Samford, and I want to know what's maybe the most memorable moment of your time playing basketball at Samford.
Well, the most memorable game that I can think of a lot of them was my sophomore year. We got the chance to play Mississippi State, and they came to Cybert, which was a little unusual, and we upset Mississippi State, and I got to play. I was not a starter, certainly my sophomore year, but I got to play in that game, and I hit a couple of really key buckets at the right time that kept us in the right place. And I would have to say that was really one of the really strong, fond memories I had of that. And I think, I haven't ever checked the record, Andy, but I think because they felt sorry for me in a way and wanted to recognize something I did my sophomore year, I got a trophy at the basketball banquet for most valuable sophomore.
Wow.
Now, you've never heard
most
of a
valuable
most valuable sophomore.
I had never noticed that on your resume before.
No, but I still have it.
Yeah.
It really, I would have to say that moment was the most memorable. The other one that I do recall, and it was that same year, as we played the first game against the University of Alabama that was ever played in Coleman Coliseum.
Wow.
And we didn't come out victorious on that game, but we were credible, and that was a pretty memorable experience.
Yeah. You know, my trophies over the years were mostly in the category, that most improved thing, which you got a pretty good idea when you get that about what it means.
No.
You started off just about as bad as you could get. The big thing about your Samford experience, the transcendent thing, is that you met Kimron here, and who is your wife of how many years now? We
celebrated 50 years this past June. Okay. In a relatively low-key celebration during the COVID. Right?
Yeah.
But no, we did, and that was certainly a blessing and a highlight of my coming to Samford. We actually met in a biology class unfortunately at 8 o'clock. And I saw her, and I started to inquire around who she was, and called her, and we dated. And she still tells the story, and I'm sure it's fact, that after our first date, she wanted to make sure she was appropriately dressed for our next class, and so she got all ready and went to class, and she says I didn't make it. that I did, and she's probably right. Yeah. I don't remember, but and we dated the rest of our time here at Samford, and got engaged. Actually, Cameron graduated a semester early. Her mom became ill, and she had gone to summer school, and she needed to go help there. And we graduated one Saturday and got married the next.
Oh, yeah.
And she's the most special thing to me in the world. We've moved some in our career in business, but she's been a great partner and always willing to do whatever she needed to do. She's a great mom. We have 2 boys that we're just so proud of, and she was always the right thing for them. But more importantly than any of that, she is just a strong Christian lady that truly lives out, the Christian life in every way. It was just a blessing, and I really think back a lot about that phone call that Coach John Edwards made to my Coach Oliver Woodard in Ellick City. Had that not happened, we wouldn't probably be sitting here talking about this today, because I don't think it would have worked out otherwise. There just wasn't a way for it to. But it did, and I'll just be eternally grateful for that.
Well, and the older we get, the more we see that thread that runs throughout our lives, and it is the providence of God. But I agree with everything you said about Kimron, and we're all blessed that you all found each other here. Corporate career for a few minutes. Run us through how you started, and zip through that to what was your final position before retirement.
Okay. When I graduated from Samford, I went to work for the John H. Harlan Company, which is a bank stationers, we call it, but they primarily supplied checks to banks. Very good company. I had met them in that spring at actually a career fair in Atlanta. And my father-in-law knew an individual that worked there, and so I got a chance to talk with him. But I joined their training program. We moved to Columbia, South Carolina, then we moved back to Birmingham, then we moved to Atlanta, and then we moved to San Diego. All that took about 8 years. And when we were in San Diego, we enjoyed living there, but we decided that it would be best for our lives if we could live east of the Mississippi. So we actually moved back to Birmingham, and then I was contacted by an industrial psychologist that did work for Harlan that also did work for Motion Industries. And he asked me if I moved back more for the job or the location, and I'd say I'd have to confess it was the location at the time. So we interviewed with Motion, and I joined Motion in 1978 as Director of Human Resources. I had worked in the human resources area. It's still called personnel in those years when I got into it, but then Motion was about to embark on some expansion programs and acquisition programs. They had just become a subsidiary of Genuine Parts Company in Atlanta in 1976. So there was a lot going on, but I went over and interviewed with the Genuine Parts people and was fortunate enough to go to work for Motion as the Director of Human Resources. And, you know, Andy, I would say never in my wildest dreams did I think I would ever become president of Motion Industries. My goal to myself was I thought it would be wonderful if I could become an officer. Mm-hmm. And I can remember that conversation where they said, we want to promote you to vice president. And I mean, I was ecstatic. Mm-hmm. I was flattered, I was honored. Because it was a good company founded by some wonderful people. They were public at that time, so you know it changed the way things work a little bit, sure, you know, in certain ways. But it was exciting. We did a number of acquisitions. We did one in California. We did one based up in Detroit, and so things were really growing as we looked. And you know, we were industrial distributors, which meant that we supplied mechanical parts to industry, but primarily it was bearings and power transmission, hose and hydraulic equipment. But basically what components that companies needed to maintain their equipment. Mm-hmm. And what I learned early on, you know, it's a significant people business because the relationships with whom you're selling this product are person to person. And it's an important technical business because you've got to make sure that what you're replacing is the right component for that particular application. But I was able to grow in that position, and then they came to ask me if I would want to broaden my experience and take on some other responsibilities, which I was able to do. And then around 1990, Cameron and I and the boys moved to Texas, and I ran what was then the Southwest Division, and that went well for us. And then I came back in 2 years, actually. I was only there 2 years, mm-hmm. and then I was made an executive vice president, then made president in 1994. And then our CEO retired in 1997, and I was made CEO in 1997 and served in that role until I retired.
Which is really an unusual thing these days for a person to get with one company and stay with that company for such a long period of time. That's not the norm at all these days. And I know there are advantages and disadvantages to everything, but what's one advantage that you might note about getting with the company and staying there?
Well, you know, I can really say I never thought about looking elsewhere. I always thought there were things to accomplish. There were things that needed to be done. There was growth opportunities in that would take place. But you know, and that also, I think, helped me understand that you have to provide growth opportunities for people to attract them to stay with companies. Right. Because not that jobs become mundane, but they do become, some of them, repetitious, and there's new. So you always want to be trying to create the right innovations and changes that make sense. Yeah. Another part, I think, was, Andy, back to my upbringing. My dad worked for Russell for 58 years. He went there at age 16 and retired at 74.
Yeah.
My mom only worked 44 years. So I can remember every time I'd see my dad and talk to him, and I still get emotional about it when I'm about to leave, and he'd say, my nickname to my dad was Jack. My middle name's Jackson, so he'd call me Jack, and he said, Jack, make them proud. Whatever you're doing, whomever you're working for, whatever you're working on, make them proud for what you try to do. And that to me is 100% effort.
Yeah.
You know, accomplishments don't always equal the effort, but 100% effort, and being just as honest and open, you know, so that it's clear of what you're trying to accomplish, whatever that is. Deal with the facts. You know, I always believed in having the right facts and data. Now there's all sorts of analytical programs that are helpful, but it does help us understand and make the right decision, so that you're using facts to base those decisions versus emotion.
I agree. I agree. And then that additional quality of discernment that you got to have to sort through all of that to get to a wise answer.
Yeah.
And then I know you would also say stewardship with what we've been given. Oh my goodness. You know, and the responsibility that you should feel when you recognize that you're the steward of something that is not yours.
Exactly. I mean, I could say it's clear, as a public company, it's clear. Your job is to bring a return to the shareholder.
Sure.
I mean, that's clear. We always worked at keeping our strategic plan pretty simple. We had 3 categories that we focused on each year when we launched our annual plan. That was sales growth, revenue growth, profit attainment, and operational excellence. And, you know, the sales growth is somewhat predicated by what's going on in the economy and acquisitions and other things, but certainly we wanted it clearly stated so that everyone knew that our goal was 8% or our goal was 5% or whatever it was. Profit attainment was to making a return on investment for the company, and we measured our performance based on profit before tax, so that it was it was pretty clear that it was done on an operating basis. And we shared that. We shared with the people of what was being done. And I learned early on in my career that was not always the case. A lot of people, not in our company, but in other companies, really didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, so they didn't understand some decisions. And then operational excellence for us was productivity and statistics supporting that, and being better and measuring that in different ways. We measured it by sales per employee. We measured it by other metrics based upon number of employees and that sort of thing, so that we had clear goals in categories of what we could do. And we found it to be amazingly successful, and it really worked in all size operations.
Yeah.
You know, because Motion had branches, we had branches with as few as 7 or 8 people. We had branches with as large as 70 or 80 people. Yeah. So you needed to be consistent in your measurement so that it's clear,
yes,
you know, of what you're operating doing. But I would think, but always we felt important to let them know what was going on. We published monthly reports that were real clear, that went to all of our operations, so they knew exactly where they stood, you know, and certainly we based compensation on the results of those reports.
Yeah.
And it worked, you know. Anyway.
We've got about a minute left for this interview, and it's going to be hard for you to answer this question in a little less than a minute, but take a run at it. Tell us why you are so excited that Beck and Julie Taylor are going to be joining us this summer, and tell us why you are truly excited about the future of Samford University.
Well, when I look at Dr. Taylor, I think his commitment to Christian higher education, his experience both at Samford and as a college president at Whitworth, His love for Samford and his desire and interest in this position are all things that convince me he's the right person for the right time. He knows you, you know him. That meant a lot to me. And your support of him as we presented to ask you about it was also very important to me, and I think was certainly, when the committee talked about it, that was the most assuring thing that we heard about Dr. Beck Taylor. And I think he's joining Samford at a time that's very exciting and very challenging. And I think he's well aware of that. He's got really big shoes to fill, Andy.
They're size 8.
No,
I know that.
But he recognizes that, because you have Samford in a wonderful place. We have a chance to be even a brighter star in Christian higher education.
I agree. I agree, and I look forward to watching it and seeing how all of that unfolds. And it's easy to support Dr. Taylor. And let me also say to you, Bill, that during my time at Samford, that you have made me proud to be associated with this university. So I thank you. I thank you for your friendship and for your guidance and for your wisdom and for all of the support that you provided to me and to so many of us at Samford over the years. Thank you, sir.
Proud to be a part. Thank you, Andy.